This is a lesson on budgets. A budget is a financial plan. It can be for the short term, in other words, how much you might want to spend at the grocery store. It could be a targeted goal, saving up for a trip, a monthly plan, working out your income, expenses, and savings, or it could be a long-term plan, like saving up for the down payment on a house. Let's look at some other definitions. A fixed expense is a cost that you know. For example, the rent that you pay each month is going to be the same every month. And yes, landlords can increase your rent once a year, but month to month, you know how much rent you're going to pay. You know that my rent is $600. Okay, I'm going to have $600 to pay for my rent. So when it's fixed, it doesn't change. A variable expense is a cost that can change. For example, groceries can change from one month to the next. The price of food can fluctuate. Maybe you want to eat steak one month and steak can be super expensive, but the next month you're happy eating pork. Well, there you go. Those two things are going to be very different in price, so your grocery bill could be very different as well. A recurring expense is a cost that happens more than once. For example, the money you spend on rent and groceries would both be recurring expenses because they continually happen. You continually have to go out and buy food. You continually have to pay rent. That's a recurring expense. An example of an expense that would not be a recurring expense would be a vacation. You don't have to go on vacation every year. You could, but you don't have to. So it's probably not a recurring expense. All right? If you have to get new brakes done on your car, that's not a recurring expense because it doesn't happen all the time. It might happen every few years. Okay? So let's do some examples. Mark is going to UCN. He has saved $6,000. He will earn $500 per week at a part-time job. He has the following expenses. These are monthly expenses: rent, cell phone, clothes, school supplies, internet, entertainment, groceries, Netflix, Disney, gas. Those are his monthly expenses. He has to pay those every month. And then he has some annual expenses: tuition and books. Which ones of these are fixed and which one of these are variable expenses? So let's go over this. Is rent fixed? Yes. Cell phone, is that fixed? Probably. Usually your cell phone bill is the same every month unless you go over on your data. But lots of plans now have infinite plans, so you don't go over on your data. Or if you do, you don't pay more. You just get throttled down and hate your life until your billing cycle resets. Clothes. Do you think that's a fixed expense? No, because you could buy clothes every month, but is it going to cost the same amount? Probably not. If you buy a shirt, it might cost you $10. If you buy a nice pair of shoes, it might cost you $300. So it's a variable expense. How about school supplies? Fixed or variable? Probably variable because you're not buying the same stuff every month. Internet? Fixed? Is that fixed? Yeah. You pay a certain amount every month. Entertainment, do you think that's fixed? Probably not, because that could be going out for supper. It could be going out for a movie. It could be going out to a Flim Flon Bomber game. So we're going to say that's variable. Groceries, we already said that's not fixed. That's variable. How about Netflix? Is that fixed? Yeah, that's the same amount every month. Disney Plus, is that fixed? Yeah, it's the same as Netflix. How about gas? Is that fixed? No, not at all, man. Holy man, does the price of gas just scares me sometimes. Sometimes it's super high, sometimes it's super low. It's all over the place. So it's kind of a variable expense. Now, so that's going over which expenses are fixed and which are variable. We're not really going to do the same for annual, but we could. I mean, tuition would be probably fixed year to year, but books would be variable because books are dependent on the course you're taking. Okay. Complete a monthly budget to determine whether Mark is in a surplus or deficit and by how much. So let's just explain what this means, okay? Let's explain a surplus and let's explain a deficit. Surplus means he has extra money, and having extra money is always a good thing, right? Deficit is spending more than he has. Spending more money than you have, as you might imagine, is a bad thing. Does it happen occasionally to the best of us? Absolutely. You know, sometimes, especially this time of year with Christmas, sometimes people feel obliged to spend a lot of money at Christmas time, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because sometimes we do it because we want to show our loved ones that we care, but it's not necessarily worth it to put yourself in debt over something like Christmas either, and put yourself in a situation where you're paying it off for the next 5 months or something, okay? So, and the idea of this is we do a budget and then we see if we can make any changes. So here we go. Now, what we'll need to do is we'll need to convert tuition and books. Actually, we need to do a couple things, okay? We'll start off with the $500 a week. Now, we need to take this and we need to convert it into a monthly amount. How are we going to do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take 500 and we're going to multiply it by, well, we could, but here's the thing. It's just a little bit more than 4, because if you multiply, because there's 52 weeks in a year, right? And then if you divide that by 12, you turn it into monthly. So if we take 500, multiply it by 52, and then divide it by 12, we actually get $2,166.67 per month. Okay? And now we also have to convert this $6,000 in savings to a monthly amount. And the best way to do that is just to divide it by 12. And if you divide that by 12, you actually get 500 on the nose. So basically, Mark is going to be able to take 500 per month from that 6,000 and put it towards his expenses. So we're converting everything into monthly amounts, and that's just going to allow us to kind of take a look at how things are month to month. Now, what we'll need to do is combine our incomes to see the total amount of income. So 500 plus 2166.67 is 2,666.67. That's how much income Mark has every month. That's how much money he has to pay his bills. Now, let's work out the expenses here. These annual expenses, we do have to convert into monthly amounts. So 7,000 divided by 12 is 583.33. And 2,000 divided by 12 is 166.67. Okay? Now what we need to do is we need to add up all of these costs. So if we add them up together, we get 2,230 total. So if you add up all of these expenses and all of these expenses, we get $2,230 if you add all those together. So what we are going to do is subtract that from the amount of income that Mark has. And just so that I don't fly away from this and you can see it, it's just 2,600, sorry, oopsies, 2,000, no, I did have it. I was looking at the wrong thing. 26, 66, 67 minus 2230. And that gives you a leftover amount of 436.67. Now that number obviously is positive. So that means it's a surplus. And it's a surplus of 436.67. So when people have extra money, they can do a lot of things with the extra money. They could choose to spend more of that money on clothes, perhaps, if that's important to them. They can decide to spend more money on entertainment, more money on groceries. They could put money in savings. The thing about a budget is, a budget is a way of showing what's important to you. If somebody spends $600 a month on their own clothes, it would be clear that that person really values buying clothes. If somebody spent $1,000 a month on a car payment, it would tell you that that person values having a nice vehicle. So the whole thing I'm trying to get at is, what people spend money on shows you what's important to them. We are going to be doing an assignment on your goals and what is important to you in the new year. Okay. Next example, here we go. All right. Ashanti is saving up money to visit Toronto with her boyfriend. She estimates the following costs. The flights are going to cost $1,000. A hotel is going to be $500. Meals are going to cost $400. Theater tickets are $250. Raptor tickets are going to be $190. She wants to take the trip in 6 months. How much must she save each month to make that happen? Okay. So first of all, to know that, we have to know how much does this cost. So straight up, all we need to do is add all these amounts together. Okay? So if we go ahead and take this and add this, it's $1,500. That's $1,900. $2,150. $2,340. So I think the cost is $2,340. How did I do? Okay? All right. That's how much the trip is going to cost. Now, it's a lot better if you were taking a trip like this to save up for it ahead of time than to put it on a credit card and try and pay it off afterwards. So let's see how much we can see Ashanti has to save up every month. So it's 6 months. So we just take $2,340 and divide it by 6. And when we do that, we get $390 per month. $390 per month. So if she saves $390 per month for 6 months, she will have enough money for that trip to Toronto. Okay? Okay? So that's how we have to do. We have to figure out the total cost, divide it by the number of months, and then that's how much she must save each month. Now, how can they save money on their trip without cutting out activities? So we can't just say, they're not going to go to the theater or forget the Raptors. Without doing that, how can they save money? What do you think? You probably could decrease the cost of one thing: meals. Now, what am I saying? Okay, what am I saying? I'm saying that, let's say you bought groceries and you bought like muffins and juice for breakfast, and maybe you went to a grocery store and bought like pre-made subs or something for lunch, and then you try to eat cheaply for supper. I'm not saying it's going to be cheap to eat meals, but it's going to be a lot cheaper, okay? It's going to be a lot cheaper. You don't have to spend a ridiculous amount of money on meals. You can, don't get me wrong, you can do that, but you don't have to do that. When you go to a city like Winnipeg or Toronto or a major city, there's lots of nice places that could cost a ridiculous amount of money to eat at, and sometimes it's worth it. But there's lots of opportunities to eat cheaply as well. So you have to try and balance that, right? So that's probably what we could probably do there. So they could reduce meal cost by buying groceries and eating at less expensive places. Now, less expensive is not necessarily bad. If you go on TripAdvisor or Yelp or Google reviews, especially in a big city like Winnipeg or Toronto, you can find hundreds of restaurants, and I'm not even exaggerating, hundreds of restaurants that are affordable, okay? So you don't have to spend a ton of money on food. You can reduce your meal cost by buying groceries and eating at less expensive places. What additional costs may they have to pay? So what are some additional costs that aren't on here that they might have to pay? If they're flying to Toronto and they are staying in a hotel and they're gonna go to the theater and they're gonna go see the Raptors play, what's something that they might have to pay for?
Transport.
Bingo. Transportation. Okay? And you know what? Like, that's something that if you are, you could spend extra money on a hotel that is either close to the Raptors, where the Raptors play or where the theater is, or perhaps you're paying a little bit more at a hotel and they offer shuttle services to like these things, right? So there are things that you can do where you can kind of build that cost into your into the actual hotel cost, or you can go ahead and in a big city, you can get an Uber, or you can get a taxi, or you could take the subway if you're in a bigger city and there's subway services. There's all sorts of things you can do. But granted, if you're flying somewhere and you need to go places to experience things, you do need to spend some money on transportation. All right, we got one last example here, and here we go. Jade works in a hotel and earns $45,000 a year. She also supplements her income by working as a tour guide and earns $200 a week. She has the following expenses. Complete a monthly budget to find out if she's in surplus or deficit and by how much. Okay, so these are typical expenses of somebody that would be an adult. They have a house and they have a vehicle and all that fun stuff. So just like the last question we did on with Mark and the UCN thing, let's work with the income first. So 45,000 a year and 200 a week. We need to convert both of those into monthly amounts. So 45,000 a year, we're just going to divide that by 12. And that's going to be $3,750. That's how much her annual hotel salary is in a monthly form, $3,750 a month. Now for the weekly amount, we're going to multiply it by 52 to turn it into a year and then divide it by 12. So that's something that you might want to put on your study sheet. I will give you study sheets today with your reviews. We're going to multiply this by 52 and then divide by 12. So 200 times 52 divided by 12 is 866.67. So her tour guide part-time job also earns her an additional $866.67 per month. So that is her two incomes. And of course, if we want to figure out what her total income is, we'll just add those together. So $3,750 plus $866.67 gives us $4,660.67. That's how much total income she has per month. And once we have her income, well, then what we'll need to do is we'll need to add up her expenses. Now, let me ask you a question. Let me just ask you a question. If we focus in on those annual expenses, what do you think is easier? Do you think it's easier to divide each of these by 12 and then add them up? Or do you think it's easier to add them all up and then divide it by 12 once? I guess it's just personal preference. I mean, we can divide them all by 12 and add them up. That's fine. So 1080 divided by 12 is $90 a month. 1440 divided by 12 is 120. 1800 divided by 12 is 150 on the nose. And 400 divided by 12 is the only ugly one here. It's $33.33. So those are all the annual expenses turned into monthlies by dividing them each by 12. And when we divide them each by 12, then we can add them to all the other ones that are already monthly expenses and see what we end up getting. Now, I got, when I added all these expenses together, I ended up getting a grand total of $3,193.33. Okay? That's her total expenses. Now we can see there is a significant difference between what her income is and what her expenses are. And that's a good thing. It's always a good idea to be spending less money than you're earning, because it allows you flexibility. You can use that extra money for savings. You could go ahead and spend more money on something that's more important to you. Like, for example, if we look at the monthly expenses in here, it says that the TV package is $60 a month. Well, maybe Jade decides, it's getting cold outside. I'm going to watch a little bit more TV. I want to watch some movies. I'm going to subscribe to the movie channels. And maybe the movie channels cost $25 extra a month. Well, obviously, we haven't calculated the exact number yet. We're going to do that right now. But if she has an extra $1,500 per month, it would make a lot of sense that she could afford an additional $25 if it meant giving her the movies that she wanted to watch. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and subtract these numbers. And when we do that, we're going to find that she has an excess of $1,423.34, and that is a surplus. Saving money is a good idea, because if you put money into your bank account and you put it in a savings account, for example, it could be there if something happens. If you have a car, maybe something goofy goes on your car and you're looking at something costing about $2,000 or $3,000. Well, if you have your money in your savings account, then it's not a big deal. You just take the money out of your savings account, pay for the repairs on the car, and off you go. Okay?